and welcome to Quick Toots. Today, we're going to learn about bias tape. You're going to learn how to use it and how to make it yourself. I use it to go over the edges of everything. I use it around the edges of corsets, hems, skirts. I use it as trim. When you are purchasing bias tape at the store, you want to make sure that you get the right stuff. I normally use extra wide double fold bias tape. Be very careful if you're looking for double fold not to buy single fold. It is a big difference. Double fold bias tape opens out like this. Single fold is only this wide. Bias is when something is cut on the diagonal of the fabric. When fabric is created, it's made of two types of threads. You have your warp threads and you have your weft threads. The real magical effect is when you pull on it diagonally, it's very stretchy. What we're focusing on today is using bias to create an edge on your seams. And the edge can be purely functional or it can be decorative. To make my own bias tape, I use my giant ruler that's 48 inches long and 2 inches wide. And I use the width of the ruler and I just draw a line. Got my ruler on diagonally on the fabric. And we have our bias. And it's got a lot of stretch to it. Then I usually cut the ends off so that they're straight. To sew the store-bought seam binding, what you do is you take the longer edge and it slides under your fabric. And then the shorter top edge folds over it. You want to line it up as nice and neatly as you possibly can. And then you sew it right at the edge. And I'll usually sort of tap the edge to make sure that it's right where I need it to be. I don't try and pin these in advance because every time I pin them, it gets wacky. And there you have it. To do a corner, I stop with the needle down. I turn it. And I fold it over nice and neatly. Sometimes if your fingers are too big, you can use a pin to kind of hold it in place or press it down. There we go. Get to it, I swivel. Come on. There we go. And that's how you do a corner. Once you're done, you want to iron it, but it looks pretty good. And I caught both sides. If you don't want to line something, you can just do this to your edge and it looks really nice on both sides and done. Sometimes you don't want to do any top stitching, you don't want it to show. And that's often when I'm going to do my own seam binding that I make. So I've got my two pieces and I sew it together so that I get a piece that's as long as I need. I sew it the width of my presser foot. You want this all the way up at the top. That way the next time you start sewing, your thread isn't going to fly out of your needle. Alright, so then what you do is then you go and you iron your seam open like that, so it's nice and flat. You're going to pretend that I did that. So I line up my two edges, and you can make your seam binding as narrow or as wide as you want it, but you have to take it into account when you're doing this. This is 2 inches wide, so if I do a 1/2 inch seam or slightly under a 1/2 inch seam, so like a 3/8 of an inch seam, then it works great. When you're sewing, you don't want to watch your needle going up and down. You want to watch your edge here, because that's how you get a straight seam. I'm coming around the corner. It's not really a corner, it's a curve. Lining it up. So I did it around a corner to show you the value of the bias edge that stretches. What I do is I go on the other side. Pull it so this is all the way to the edge. It's not like got any weird thing like that going on. You want it all the way on its seam. You fold it over, you fold it in, you pin it, and then I'll go back in and I'll hand stitch this around my edge, nice and neat. Oh, here it is. All neatly pinned and ready to be sewn. Now I'm just going to sew with a single piece of thread. I'm not going to double it. Now obviously the hand sewn takes a lot longer. It is also possible to make your own store-bought type. What you do is with your piece of bias, when you cut it, you go to your iron and you iron it over like this, and then you iron it in half, and there you have it. There is a tool that you're supposed to be able to slide this through, and it supposedly folds it for you nice and neatly and perfectly. I have one of those and have never had good luck with it, so it's easier for me to just hand do that. And most of the time when I'm doing seam binding, I do it in a way that I don't want any stitches showing, so I hand sew it. And this is a great thing to do in front of the television. So I just pick up a little bit of the bottom, and then the top I'm doing a whip stitch around the edge. It's my favorite stitch. Ideally, you only want to catch maybe one thread on the back side, because you certainly don't want this showing through to the outside. There's a little knot in my thread. And once you get going, it can get pretty quick. As you go along, remove your pins and put your pins in your pin cushion so that your costume shop's assistant doesn't yell at you. See how nicely it's curving around? That's why the bias is so important. If you're just doing a straight line, it's not as critical, but it's still going to lay better. Even on a straight line, it's going to work better on the bias. Every once in a while, you want to check your backside, make sure that it's not showing through. I've got a couple of places here where you can see a couple of stitches, but it's not terrible. So notice as I'm going with the one thread that I want to keep my thread tail about 2 inches away from my edge at all times. So I'll just gradually pull it through my needle as I go so that I don't unthread my needle, because that's not a good day, so that I don't end up sewing with a double layer of thread, because I don't want that extra bolt right here, and I don't need the strength because it's just an edge. It doesn't get any stress. Tie it off. And then to hide my tail, I take my needle and thread and I put it through in between, in between my layers of fabric and through. Then I can cut it off here, but then the tail disappears. iron it nice and flat. Let's see what a pretty edge you get. Lovely seam binding.